Hello, everyone. Welcome to another exciting episode of the world's only information podcast, Infopedia. I'm your host, Crage2.
I'm Frankie.
And I'm Teafed. Guys, big update on the on our Patreon milestone. We are now at $600,000 per day, which is up by about 20% since last episode. So that's a good thing, I would reckon. Well, anyways, I appreciate all of you guys giving your money to the Information Foundation. Our correspondents are currently working hard on Podcast Village. We've got some signups. We got some potential signups now for new citizens of the Information Army, armed in their grand regalia.
About the paramilitia, we are putting out a Google form, a poll, so that we can all put to a vote what our official uniform is going to be. There will be all kinds of polls going forward. You are only eligible to vote, though, obviously, if you're a citizen. And citizen is our silver tier on our Patreon. So if you're able to donate about $50,000 a day, you can then join and potentially even have like a leadership position if we deem you fit.
I wanted to clarify one other thing about Podcast Villages, which is because I've been getting a lot of emails about this. I want to clarify that we're not actually a separate nation from the United States, but rather these are all terms used to
Well, I think that now that we have that legalese out of the way, we can talk about the brass tacks, which is that, if I'm doing quotes with my fingers right now, but we're not making citizens of a different nation, but there will be a different set of laws, a different tax code. You will have to relinquish your current United States citizenship in order to join. And any foreign citizenships that you may possess as well, which will be subject to a scrutinous background check. And one of the other attributes of this is that the part of the reason why we have the Podcast Village in the first place is not just so that we can create an environment that's conducive to the world's most important creators and artisans and scientists of the mind, but because we need to make more money. And the reason we need to make more money is because it's expensive to run not a country. So one of the things we need is more construction and business partners. Currently, we're coupled with Federax Capital, who were responsible for creating one of the world's smallest hotels, and they are joining us as partners to help in the construction of this because they are very savvy when it comes to like concrete, wires, glass, sandbags, paint brushes. They know all about this stuff, and for us, that's too hard. So we have everything we need, as long as we have, but we need the money. We need as much money as you can give us.
Yeah, we've only gotten one ultra deluxe package on our for our Patreons. This is Steve Camry, who was very generously able to directly link his bank account to the fund and relinquish all funds. So we definitely encourage that behavior. Thank you, Steve.
This episode specifically was sponsored in part by our wonderful business partners, Exxonmobil. Now, Frankie, let me ask you something. When was the last time you had to fill up at the pump?
Literally 3 days ago.
What can you tell me about that experience, and how do you think it would be different if Exxonmobil hadn't liberated us from the reins of the biological terrorism that was horses?
So, I feel like if Exxonmobil hadn't, kind of monopolized the oil industry, I would have had to deal with a lot more horses trying to like get involved, chewing on the gas pump and like shitting on the concrete, and like that's just kind of not what it's kind of an inconvenience, really. They kept like eating my credit cards when I would go like try to pay, and I just don't get why they were employing horses anyway, because it's just like they were you gonna pay them in apples? So
I think that one of the things that Exxonmobil brought to us was really the technological tools necessary to not only liberate us from, or rather enable us to use fossil fuels, which is surprise, why we're doing our dinosaur episode, but also because the employees of all these gas stations were horses. Historically, horses pumping the gas, horses, and we get into all sorts of things because horses are not really beasts that are designed to do customer service. And so it was a very ineffective system that was brought on by one of our late presidents, Barbara Sweet, in 1908 when the car industry was coming to fruition. This is just a bit of an aside. This is a little historical note. But when cars started to exist, horses became unemployed. And so as a program to prevent economic collapse, horses were employed at gas stations as a sort of method of as really just kind of a handout, because, they never did anything useful. So thank you, Exxonmobil, for eradicating horses.
That being said, with some housekeeping out of the way, let's move on to the show.
So there's a bit of a misconception that all dinosaurs who ever lived during the same time period, but that's not true. They existed throughout time and were not just a single sort of ecological blip. There is the famous Jurassic period. There was the Triassic period. There was the Quadrassic period and the Classic period. We're mostly familiar with the Quadrassic Classic types of animals. If you know any fun dinosaurs that spring to your mind, they're probably from that era. But let's start with dinosaurs just in general.
So when we get down to the Platonic ideal of a dinosaur, it's kind of, there are three main qualities shared by all or most dinosaurs with very few outliers. One is big, taller than you. Two is scales, or rough. And three is now some of them are birds.
So let's talk about big. Big, when quality has to be as large as they can. When there's only as much food as they're needed, you have to get as much as there is. So for a small creature, it was almost impossible to compete once there was dinosaurs, which is why during the Jurassic period, when dinosaurs first existed, virtually all smaller animals, terrestrial animals, basically were forced into minute, very specific ecological niches and subgenres, and were not really very popular or mainstream anymore because the dinosaurs were so big they could practically eat anything because everything's smaller than them. For me personally, as a Homo sapien, the hamburger represents the perfect meal because it is big as my hands and I can fit it in my mouth taking bites. But for dinosaurs, a hamburger would be a pittance of a meal, and rather they would elect instead to eat the entire fast food worker. If they were alive today, that we might, with a speculation.
So there's actually a good reason why all of these dinos were so big and taller than you. It's because back in the Jurassic period, and even a little before that, 1 or 2 years before that, the Earth had less mass. And because the Earth was less massive, there was a weaker force of gravity, which kind of allowed these majestic creatures to achieve statures the likes of which have never been seen since. It's kind of also why bugs are small, is because there's so much more gravity now that you just can't get that big even if you wanted to.
But not only were dinosaurs big, they were also small. And I don't mean in size, but I mean in number. dinosaurs, despite being the most common species, were this is a weird paleontological point that I think a lot of people don't understand about population size and how it changes over time. But basically, the idea is that, as everyone knows, the dominant species of a planet, in this case Earth, the dominant species is regaled with a certain, let's say, benefit of living, which basically means that the most populous animal in the Earth has special abilities, and the dinosaurs in this case were given the ability to be as numerous or as few as needed in the situation.
So many people find this very confusing and challenging because many species on Earth have the anti-elusive quality of being found wherever they are, whereas a dinosaur can only be found where it wants to be seen. This is actually a result of the texture of their skin, which was rough. The reason why this is... So if you've ever understood the physical phenomena of the design of the golf ball, when the golf ball was designed, they realized that it had a lot of air resistance due to the fact that the perfectly cylindrical shape that they were designing created a barrier in the air. But instead, they created a golf ball that had small nucleation sites on it. And those are small pockets in which quantities of fluid or material can pass over and create spheres in which there is no material, allowing it to travel through the air with lower resistance than if it was perfectly spherical. And the dinosaurs, they all knew about this, and we'll get to how they knew. It was not just chance that they knew that this was true. So as a species, the roughness of their skin was something that none of us could possibly understand or perceive. We think about sharks, again, another elusive species that manages to evade us often. They have very rough skin, and they share this property, but much like something approaching the speed of light, to try to understand how rough dinosaur skin was is not really possible within the physical realm of what we have our physical perception of. If a human being was to try to touch the skin of a dinosaur, there would be first of all, scientists speculate, because we haven't ever experienced this physical phenomena, much like a black hole, but we expect that the hand would be erased immediately, as if a fine vibrating eraser were to abrade the hand over the course of hundreds of years as you approached it, leaving basically a mist of human flesh in the wake of your fingers. Which is why there didn't need to be very much of them. In the same right that the ninjutsu practitioners of old were able to create duplicate versions of themselves by moving very fast, dinosaurs were able to immediately leave or enter a vicinity based on their speed.
So the third and final common biological trait shared by all dinosaurs is that some of them are birds. As we know, in today's society, there are birds everywhere in the sky and like on heaven and earth. So a lot of people don't know this, but the birds used to be dinosaurs. So basically what happened was we like to think that they all went extinct. That's not actually the case. Like quite a few of them of the aerial variety basically evaded what we will touch on later of the main reason why they went extinct, but due to their aerial prowess, were able to avoid the catastrophe that then struck.
Speaking of dinosaurs, the ecological environment in which they grew up was really is quite diverse. There was wet areas, there was dry areas, and there were areas in between. And these dinosaurs were able to fit into all of these three different subcategories of ecological environments. The wet dinosaurs you might You've probably seen the skeletons of a lot of different wet dinosaurs at museums and stuff because their skeletons get really well preserved. So we know a little bit more about wet dinosaurs than dry dinosaurs.
There were many very well documented wet dinosaur species, the most popular of which was actually the inspiration for a popular children's media franchise known as Pokemon. Blastoise was a real creature. The guns with water were real and used to feed their young, like a baby bird. And this is actually the later evolution of Blastoise was what modern birds are today. But they've replaced the steel looking water pistols coming out of its shell with the complex digestive tract that enables the birds to regurgitate food into the mouths of their young. Another common species of wet dinosaur was the fishosaur. The fishosaur was a very distant relative of the fish, but they're actually cousins. The fish and dinosaurs both share a common genetic ancestor that we estimate is about 100,000 years times like 20, depending on who you ask in the scientific record, between them. The fishosaurs looked and acted like fish, but as I mentioned, they don't have a lot of genetic relationship. This is because they were copying them. As wet dinosaurs were known to not have very many original ideas due to the fact that they didn't really have to be very smart since the water they needed to drink was all the way around them. This is in stark contrast to the dinosaurs, or the dry dinosaurs, which had to possess an enormous amount of intelligence in order to find liquid water for them to drink.
Dry dinosaurs also were also the branch of dinosaurs that evolved into like pterodactyls, the pterosaurs, the saurosaur, and all those.
You might be wondering, what is the reason that we know so much more about the wet dinosaurs versus the dinosaurs, even though the wet dinosaurs paled in intelligence compared to the dinosaurs? And that's, Teafed touched on it a little bit earlier, is that when you're in a wet biome, there's something called a bog, which is essentially a type of goop that is ultra rich in carbon, and basically it's really hard. If you ever stuck your if you've ever stuck your toe in a pit of sludge, then you know what I'm talking about. It's real hard to get out. And you know what, a lot of those dinosaurs found themselves sinking into piles and puddles of goop. So the carbon-rich environment acted as a preservative to be able to keep fresh those bones for long enough that we were able to find them. And with the dinosaurs, if you have like an intermediate climate, it simply is just not conducive to preservation. Now, on the other far end of the spectrum, with like the really, really dry dinosaurs, right? For example, like the Nanorex, the Gyroraptor, those lived in really, really hot desert climates. So it's kind of like if you have a lot of moisture, it's really good for preserving. And then if you have like virtually zero moisture, that is also very good for preserving any kind of biological remain, not actually just dinosaurs. So basically any dinosaur that lived comfortably in like a Mediterranean style, Southern California style climate is unfortunately, their records are lost to time, which is kind of beautiful in a certain sort of poetic way.
I'm glad you brought up the gyrosaur because it represents one of the most unique and fun dinosaurs that exist. The gyrosaur is very notable for having one of the only naturally occurring free spinning organs in the natural world. Before the gyrosaur was discovered, the only other organism to possess such a free spinning thing was the flagella of bacteria, which are like a propulsion system that looks like a little tail, if you know which looks like a little tail. So the gyrosaur had wheels. for feet. And it was able to move around by spinning the wheels. And many scientists speculate, well, we can see that there's an axle, like a free spinning joint, but how would it be possible to interiorly encase this in, or lubricate this as you would with a regular car? And I think the answer to that is surprisingly simple. There was just no skin on the dinosaur in that area of its body. The skin stopped around the pelvis, much like it does around the gums of our teeth. So you can really kind of imagine that the gyrosaur was really more of like a tooth car.
Yeah, actually, you may know a common ancestral descendant of that dinosaur, which is the owl, which famously is able to move its entire body inside out, or upside down, or whatever the direction is.
I believe the what you're referring to is an owl's ability to spin its head turnways all the way around, Exorcist style.
That's right. Thank you, Frankie.
It's my pleasure. So, I'm going to pose a question to the group, but I'm going to answer it first. So the question is, what is your favorite dinosaur? Mine in particular is the Pythagosaurus. It is a we talked about Platonic ideals before. This is probably one of the most perfect dinosaurs you could ever come across. So the beautiful thing about this dinosaur is that it was made up almost completely of triangles. It was a three-dimensional creature, and yet its bones, or the remains of what we were able to find, were simply perfect triangles. And this is where we actually get all the types of triangles from if you've ever taken geometry. Isosceles triangle was the shape of the skull. A right triangle was the shape of its penis. And the rest of the bones were made up of equilateral triangles. Geometrically speaking, the Pythagosaurus was perfect. We have never found any developmental variations of the Pythagosaurus. It is quite impressive, actually, how little gene drift there was, which is nearly impossible if you know anything about genetics. Due to environmental pressures in a usual state, your phenotype, your genotype will respond to the environment around you, and you will then adapt to that. Not with the Pythagosaurus, which is probably why it went extinct along a lot earlier than most of the rest of the dinosaurs, because it simply refused to adapt because it was so flawless.
Well, before I went on to my favorite dinosaur, I just wanted to mention that the scientific community is not actually sure if the Pythagosaurus was actually even classified as a dinosaur due to its geometric heritage. Both the Pythagosaurus and the Spherosaurus are currently under heavy debate, so it's just seen, but a lot of people do think that they are dinosaurs.
Why do you have to shit on everything I love? Never mind.
I'm just trying to. I'm just like that's just what the scientists say.
Community isn't even going to
Why?
if it's real.
Well, I'm like I mean, I don't know. Anyways, this is my favorite dinosaur, and it's the Arnoldosaurus, found by Arnold Schwarzenegger in California in 1980 something. I don't know. I guess I don't really know how to do this show, but
well, now that that trite and uninspired opinion has been aired and the stink has cleared the room, I'd like to comment in a more refined way about what I consider to be my favorite dinosaur, which was the Nanorex. So many people are aware of the dinosaur species Tyrannosaurus rex, which means king lizard. The Nanosaurus rex, or the Nanorex, was the same thing but smaller. The interesting fact about this is that most of the organs in a dinosaur's body are scaled in proportion to the size of their stature, meaning they have larger stomachs, longer intestinal tracts, more muscle mass. But the Nanorex has all these quantities, except the brain was not proportionately sized. The brain remained the same size as a Tyrannosaurus Rex, which still fit because the Tyrannosaurus Rexes had the brains about the size of a uncooked chicken breast. So there was actually no real issue with it being the same size. But the frightening thing was that Tyrannosaurus Rex is largely known as like sort of a medium level of intelligence for a creature that big. Were so large and cumbersome that they never really had like the 5'4" point guard sort of energy that the Nanorex had. And so Nanorexes were known for being horrifically racist. And they were able to do things that no other dinosaur species was ever capable of doing before, which was discriminating against other dinosaur species in a way that created... the terms that we would use now, I think, are different than the paleontologists in the 1700s would use. But in general, the Nanorexes were very... they were hostile. And they were devious, and they were fiendish. And they were able to do things that most dinosaurs wouldn't dare to do. Like tax evasion, wire fraud, and in some cases, armed burglary.
So we touched on this earlier, but how did dinosaurs actually go extinct? Well, even though there may not be a complete consensus, most of the scientific community seems to agree that the extinction event was due to something known as planned obsolescence. This term originated in the techosphere with companies such as Apple purposefully baking into their products a sort of lack of quality that would force the consumer to keep buying and consuming each new generation of product that they would produce. The same principle can be applied to the dinosaurs via the mechanic of exogenetics. So, as far as exogenetics, we all know at least a little bit about genetics. They are the small things that live in our cells and our gametes that are responsible for all sorts of things that has even yet to be fully understood. They are made up of DNA, the double helixes, and chromosomes, and they are able to copy themselves, and it is a fundamental definition of life that we are able to reproduce in this way. Not a lot of people know about exogenetics. So exo comes from the Greek exo, meaning outside, and genetics comes from the Arabic gene, which means genes. So to combine the two, it basically means genes outside genes. So if you were to imagine, if you will, a marionette show. So the puppets themselves are us. And we are, whether we like it or not, to an extent, our lives are determined by the puppet master that is genetics. But what a lot of people don't know is that puppet master has a puppet master also manipulating it from the shadows. This is exogenetics. You might be wondering, what? How come I can't see them? I can see genes. First of all, no, you can't. Don't fucking lie to me. We can see them through a microscope, if that's what you mean. But otherwise, with the naked eye, it cannot be seen. Now, exogenes cannot be seen through a microscope because they are on a much smaller, or rather quantum level. They are quantum objects.
Yeah, basically how this works is it's a little bit complicated. This is like cutting edge research. The guy who found out about this, I think his name is Phil Occhio. Phil Occhio, PhD in paleontology and genetics. He basically posited, which is a fancy word for suggest. He posited particles on the quantum level not only are able to manipulate the real physical world as we see it, but in fact control it. And this was suggested to be the case in his seminal paper that he released half a year ago, 6 months. About in March. And the title of the paper is "Spooky Action at a Distance Begets Spooky Action Within a Distance." Subtitle: Quantum entanglement is not as entangled as we may have previously thought earlier in the year.
Phil Occhio was assisted by his professor Skip Flamingo during his discovery of quantum genetics. Skip Flamingo was, before he was a professor of paleontology, was actually a magician and a social media influencer. His role as a magician was in the world of manifestation, which, as many of you know, is the ability to change the course of the future by modifying the thoughts and the affirmational phrases of the present. Before he decided to be a paleontologist, as a magician, he utilized this ability to amass enormous wealth and oftentimes to amass information and knowledge, as Skip Flamingo was a channeler of information directly into his mind rather through reading or hearing information from other people. In a similar vein, he wanted to be able to, instead of inducing information into his mind through the power of manifestation, to be able to change the world around him through his thoughts and ideas, which is sort of the idea is like going in reverse. So instead of untangling things about the past with the power of the mind, it would be to change things about the future or uncover things about the future that had yet to occur. And during his research of doing this, he discovered that there was only one real answer to how so many dinosaurs could have existed and not exist anymore. And the reality was exogenetics, or the ability to have genetics be controlled by the mind. And I think it's no surprise that, of course, as we know, dinosaurs existed long before any intelligent, as what we would call sentient life existed on the planet. But humans were, quote unquote, not, present at the same time as dinosaurs. But we also acknowledge that human beings are among the smartest species alive. It was the idea of Phil Occhio that perhaps humans wished the dinosaurs away.
So one of the principles of quantum entanglement is the Heisenberg principle, which posits, yes, I'll use that word again, that in order for multiple realities existing in the same place and time to be reconciled, an observer is needed. Phil Occhio, in that same paper, which was titled "Spooky Action at a Distance Begets Spooky Action Within Distance," subtitle, "It's not as spooky as we originally thought a few months ago," he suggests that the exogenetics are in fact the observer that was able to not only collapse but choose the exact outcome of the dinosaurs, as all possibilities existed at once until their intervention. This higher dimensional ability is not yet well understood and is still being processed and discovered as we speak. But more importantly, the will of humanity, from what we understand, seems to be, again, quantumly entangled with that of exogenetics itself. And so what Craig 2 was getting at was that the collective will of humanity, in order for humanity to exist, unfortunately needed the room to flourish, which was previously being used by dinosaurs, who were the dominant species for millions and millions of years. And so with the invention of the hibachi grill and the subsequent tricks involved, something called the volcano was developed. And as we all know, it is one of the the staples of a hibachi experience. Now, we've all had this exact hibachi experience, and so again, Phil Accio thought, what if that is what triggered the exact scenario that had been collapsed? What if we, as a species, in order to exist, willed it that dinosaurs would simply walk into a volcano, getting the idea from the brilliant hibachi trick that we all know and love? And that is what we have found to be true. We find, lava is a wonderful preservative for biological remains. We have found concentrations and concentrations of these fossils in volcanic pits. And so, as we understand it, it is long and it is complicated, but at the end of the day, they simply walked. They simply walked to their extinction. I wouldn't feel guilty, though.
Many people have commented that walking to one's own extinction doesn't exactly represent a useful evological paradigm for these species. Most people would suggest that perhaps if the dinosaurs wanted to stay alive, they simply could have not walked into the volcano. But many paleontologists, including Sharon Friend, have suggested that this might not have been as stupid as one thinks. New evidence suggests that by walking into a volcano, the dinosaurs managed to prevent something worse from happening to them later on that would have made it even harder to stay alive. In a sort of way that perhaps one might consider a human being preemptively or reducing their lifespan by their own, personal decisions to be a sort of a good decision in the long run as well. And when you think about the life on Earth as a long, evolving, changing, fourth dimensional organism, for all of the worst, stupidest, and ugliest dinosaurs to walk into a volcano would be very merciful to all the superior and cooler dinosaurs that chose not to do that.
Such as the birds that we know and love today.
Speaking of dinosaurs, we've got a dinosaur of our own. Intern Ivy is on the case today, out at the American Paleontological Institute, interviewing a certain Dr. Arnold Fitzjames. How are you doing, Ivy?
I'm doing good, Teafed. I'm here with Dr. Arnold Fitzjames. Dr. Fitzjames, what is exactly that a paleontologist does?
Well, there's a lot of debate. There's very few answers to the bigger questions in life, and most of us choose to agree that paleontological societies are mostly at the mercy of learning about those big, beautiful dinos.
So what goes into the process of excavating dinosaur bones?
In the lifetime I've spent digging up dinos, there's one thing I can tell you for sure. They're down there, just keep digging.
And how is it exactly that dinosaur bones are found so deep within the earth?
That's the best part of all. You don't have to dig when the dirt falls down. Most dinosaurs would die at the bottom of a mountain, and when the sand and the dirt came rolling down the hill, the dirt would cover them all up, and that would happen over and over and over again until the dinosaur was completely immersed in dirt.
Some of those dinosaur bones hidden in the earth are over 200,000 years old.
That's right.
How do you go about... What are you doing? Why are you covering that display over there up?
There's no need to hide what doesn't have to feel there be in the first place at all.
Alright. I'm just gonna skip ahead here. Some paleontologists have researched and theorized that some dinosaurs weighed up to 75 tons. What really went behind the biology of some of these enormous creatures?
Dinosaurs were plump and fat as the tits on Mother Teresa.
Alright.
I've seen dinosaurs rocking a pair on them that would make the worst scoundrel pee his pants.
I'm not sure if you could say that. I think it's a little bit irrelevant. I mean, like...
Young lady, if you knew what I knew about dinosaurs, you wouldn't be saying that.
Sorry, I know that you're the PhD here, but I don't think that the bones really suggest that they had really large mammary glands. Sorry if I'm wrong here. I don't know the current research.
Now that's another strange and prolific misconception that the government wants us to not believe, because we never had the bones in the first place. The bones that the dinosaurs had were the bones that you didn't have when you needed them the most. Have you ever noticed how when the dinosaurs came around, nobody had any more things to talk about? No one even drank any breakfast water anymore. It all went away. And as soon as they figured out the dinosaur bones were behind it, the government had to make sure that we didn't not know that it wasn't happening to anyone.
Wait, can you back up a little bit? I'm getting a little uncomfortable with you being this close. Why are you dripping?
Young lady, if I had it my way, I would turn you into a dinosaur so foul that nothing could save you from what was going to happen next.
I need you to back up. Wait, I don't think that you're who I'm supposed to interview anyways. Why does your name tag just say the hole digger?
I've been digging holes for longer than you've been alive. I'll be digging holes for longer than you'll be dead. And I can tell you one thing. If there's a volcano that needs some digging, we're not gonna know until it's already done. When the dinosaurs curled up in that nasty hot little hole in the ground, I can tell you one thing's for sure. They weren't just in there laying around. They were moving. They were getting things started. They were acting in ways we can't even imagine anymore.
Alright, I think that we got this off on the wrong foot. We might have to cut up to here, but that's fine. I'll just skip ahead a little bit. I'm gonna just ask a question and just try to respond to it with correct information and everything. What are some of the biggest challenges that you face as a paleontologist?
Now, I'm sure you'll believe me if I tell it to you in the right way, but I can assure you that there's never been a rock I didn't want to fuck.
Sorry, can you stop rubbing that rock?
Now, with a rock like that, you'll notice some curves and some contours, and these contours contain mysteries that even the dinosaurs knew about, but we human folk have yet to discover.
Can you not get so, sexual? It's a little...
Yes?
Do you really think that's appropriate on the show?
Well, I think there's something that you might need to learn about what is and isn't a fossil. Many people think the only thing that's fossilized is something that was once organic. But when we look at a rock, we realize that there could never have been something so much of them and so big if it didn't grow from something. And that's when you start to realize something even scarier, which is that all the rocks in the world came from the molten, bleeding heart of our planet, the sun.
So the thing that is in the sky above our heads right now is, and what you're saying is below our feet. You really, that makes sense to you.
If that matters to you, and I won't take it away from you, because you seem like a person who can't afford to have much taken away from them at all.
All right, you know what? I'm done with this interview. You're not a professional in this field, and I don't know. Either you're making up who you are, or, quite frankly, this entire place is some sort of sham. So I'm done.
Wait, one more thing I need to ask you. How many are you?
How many?
How many do you have left?
Okay, this entire time you've made no sense at all. What do you even mean by?
Are you gonna keep it to yourself, or are you gonna share with the rest of us?
All right, look, you're clearly not going to explain anything. We're going to get nothing of educational value here. So I think I'm done with this interview, and I'm done with you, quite frankly.
You're more foolish than I thought.
Why are you holding up that stone like that?
Goodbye, Intern Ivory.
Ah! I need security.
Thank you to Intern Ivory for their labor and service to us. It's too bad that none of that interview was actually usable and in fact will be edited out.
Thank you again to Exxonmobil for sponsoring the show. We actually have a special coupon code for listeners who stuck all the way till the end. The first 3 people able to use this coupon code will get free gasoline for the rest of their life at any Exxonmobil station. Are you ready? Here's the coupon code. Can I have gasoline, please? Congratulations to whatever lucky 3 listeners got their free for life ever oil.
And now for a little segment we like to call people who took the time out of their day to write us letters and then send it to us either through email or to put it in their outbox to get it to us so that we can read it.
Our first letter comes from Cy Carity, who asks, "Hello, Infopedia Squad. I've been a long-time listener, and I'd just like to say that I've been listening for the longest time that most people ever thought what we could do. But I don't think that we have enough hours left in the day to hear all the podcast knowledge that we need to have. If we can't listen to Infopedia, where else can we get this wonderful knowledge that everyone in the show seems to know so much about? Thank you. I love you."
Part of the purpose of the Infopedia podcast, so the information that we possess and absorb through our skin and minds is the so the purpose of the podcast is to be the only purveyor of this kind of information.
But if you really want to know the truth, if you really want to know where it all comes from, you don't need to shop very far, because it all comes from right inside your mind. That's right. As the great Skip Flamingo once understood, that most information that exists in the world is just a permutation of words and ideas and concepts that anyone can say. It's coincidence that once we understand something, we'll just say it out loud. And when we say it out loud and it's the correct information, then everyone agrees. But there's nothing stopping anyone from saying all the right words in the right order. And because of the faculties of grammar, anyone can practically form a sentence to create a cohesive idea that comes flying straight out of your mouth into the ears of an unsuspecting and unconsenting person or child. So I think the biggest thing to remember is that you can never stop talking. Never stop coming up with your ideas, because one of them, or all of them if you're good enough, can be considered true.
It's a somewhat dangerous practice. I wouldn't recommend it. Everyone get into it due to the level of misinformation that could be gathered through these means. But if you're an expert, it is certainly possible to glean truth from reality directly, which is a valuable skill to have. Shout outs to Skip Flamingo, by the way. Everything I learned from him.
Okay, this letter comes to us from a Cliff Hazelwood of Balboa, Canada. He say, "Hey crew, if you could be a camp counselor for any type of camp, what would the focus be, and would you treat them nicely, the kids or attendees?" What a great question, Cliff. If I were to be a camp counselor at any camp, summer or otherwise, I think it would have to be space camp. It's not everybody gets to go to space, but if you're, lucky enough to be able to go to space camp, you get to live there for a whole week or so. And there's no summer in space, so you can really just go whenever you can. And I would be as nice as I can to the kids, but boy, if they don't get on my nerves. Well, that just about does it for this episode of Infopedia. Thanks again to our sponsor, Exxonmobil. And remember to
always stay in.
To stay?
Stay?
Wait, so we all saying this in unison?
Yeah.
Stay info.